Siri_bot says, Siri_bot is here, Saribo arrive. Jans laughed says, look at these handsome fellas.
Yeah, give it time. Nothing works.
Jans laughed says, although Bromia seems to be having some skin issues lol.
Yeah, I'm just plugging shit into shit right now. I can't seem to emulate the eyebrows. I don't know where those come from. It's not reflection. 80 streams. Oh shit. No curveballs. I'll get you one of these days. Stream for 8 seconds. Leave. Like I'll follow the general instructions based on Warframe, and it seems like nothing is packed with this. There's no alpha channels in here. Okay, what's plugged in right now? Everything is supposed to be plugged in. Oh, I don't want to do that. Flow normal strand, strand noise. Details, DCM, detail.
Dieblo4 says, hey, good afternoon, Geos.
Hey, Devil.
Dieblo4 says, how are we all today? Jans Laughed says,
Hanging in there.
hi hi. Jans Laughed says, lizard. Dieblo4 says, hi Jan.
Hmm.
Dieblo4 says, I got my new computer. It is Asus
I
Ryzen
heard.
7 with 1070 NVIDIA 16GB with 32GB DDR5 and has A18 screen. A18 works very well or seems to LOL.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how to benchmark um, upgrades other than just playing games that usually lag or lower frame rate. Like I would normally. I don't know if I've played PoE2 since I got the new GPU. Or ordinarily, I have to run PoE2 at the like lowest settings, and then I'd still only get like 40 frames.
Dieblo4 says, well, I am hoping this will last me for some time.
Yeah. Hmm. Lordy. Okay, let me see.
Dieblo4 says, it says it is a 144 Hz 3 milliseconds screen, not sure what that means. LOL.
144 frames per second, I believe, because normally normal
Says,
monitors are.
that man just kidnapped Toffee.
Monitors are usually 60 frames. Nowadays they're 120 for like the first upgrade. And I think 180 is what people usually upgrade to tops, but you only really notice like 120. Past that, I think it's all the same.
Dieblo4 says, cool.
Ну, кружочек я отвлекусь хотя бы. Что?
It's me right now. Okay, I gotta remember what I'm looking for.
Dieblo4 says, so I did okay then.
I guess. I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, all things considered, I don't know much about computers. If you throw a name of a GPU at me, I'd be like, fuck, I don't know. It sounds alright. If it runs well, it runs well. You just need to find a game to benchmark it with. Because they're just words and numbers to me. Play a game you normally struggle with playing and see if it plays better. Or worse, if you need to return shit. I don't know.
Dieblo4 says, yes, I will wait now because I do know that Crimson will test it out.
Okay. Cached out windows.
Jans Laft says, 1070 is a little told I think. But Crimson has been in development a long ass time too and I'm no hardware expert anyway. Jans Laft says, old asterisk.
As long as RTX, I think it's fine. I don't know. Because RTX is the ray tracing GPUs.
Dieblo4 says, I did watch a guy testing it out on the new GTA and it was working great and looked fantastic. Dieblo4 says, it's his RTX.
That's the most I know about current gen and previous gen. It's like GTX and RTX, something like that, where GTX was like before ray tracing, pre-ray tracing era. I guess there is a little bit of alpha, but this just looks
Dieblo4 says,
incorrect.
and this laptop is all steel tough.
Oh, so you can take it to work with you.
Dieblo4 says, I would pally if I had some work to
Yeah.
go to LOL.
No, I don't see anything different. I was hoping maybe one of the PNG files was corrupt.
Dieblo4 says, I
but
do like this bigger screen, I can even lip read you now.
Oh, lip read. Last screen must have been tiny. Okay, how could I fix this? So 1024 adjusted. Where's the fur? I have an idea. So a lot of these texture coordinates are UV, right? Is that the only one?
Dieblo4 says, okay, I got to nip out for 30 minutes, be back soon.
I'll be here. Oh yeah, that song's bugged. That's right. Um, I forgot. It's like UV. Nope. Shit. It's under vector. It's not that. No, I've got another one somewhere. These things. Texture coordinate. Use EV anyway. Why does it look like that? Why does it look like that?
Jans laughed says, bisexual lighting bromius.
I just can't seem to make any meaningful change. I need to look at the reference again. There's no metal, so is there just no multiplying happening? So what I got was the diffuse map was supposed to go last. Which is this thing. According to this fucking text document. Details D. Diffused mix. I don't know what the ambient occlusion is, because that would be what this thing is. It's usually multiply last. Base color. There's be black. Right? I guess I just squish these. I don't think I'm getting anything meaningful from those. Yeah. So base tint is just black. Oh my god. Base tint top. Tint 0. B. Not quite there yet. RGB tint as a factor. Tint mask. I don't believe I have a tint mask. I do. Entire thing. Or just red. I'm looking at the wrong thing. What's it looking at?
Jans Laft says, oh, so what do you make of the abused and coerced Steven Sharif story?
Oh, I actually haven't listened to it yet. Let's do that right now. It sounds like he didn't bring up any of the accusations. Sounds like a dodge. Let me pull it up. Because I saw it, I'm like, I'll listen to it
later. If you want to spend more time, Kira has a longer video actually looking at the documents and more detail.
See in front of me the Steven Sharif file.
We can listen to that. I've got time.
This is the lawsuit of Steven.
Oh, hang on. I gotta separate it. There we go.
Versus the board, the shadow board, right? That nobody knew existed until, at least internally to the company, in November of 2025. These have been around since 2024 as a board officially. And obviously at this point, we basically have a bunch of sides of this story, apart from Steven's side and some other investors and stuff that, you know, may or may not come out at some point. But we've had the employee side where they were obviously notified that the company was basically fucked. And they've also filed their own lawsuit because they're owed wages that have not been paid, and PTO and severance and things like that, for their wrongful dismissal under the WARN Act in California. And then we also have Robert Dawson's side, in a way, through his TFE Game Holdings company, is a lawsuit in Nevada State Court against Steven Sharif, which alleges that Steven and his husband embezzled tens of millions of dollars from the company. And then, of course, we have Jason Karamanis, who has been an investor in the company since, you know, like 10 years ago or something, where he's released a bunch of text messages and made a bunch of claims that he has evidence that's going to come out eventually that shows that Steven Sharif has done X, Y, and Z. And there are a bunch of videos going over these allegations and things that have been made public. This is the first time we've seen Steven's side of the story, and this is a lawsuit with 52 pages that has been filed in the federal court, Southern District of California. I'm going to go over this in its entirety. I'm going to skip certain sections that just give you like background information that we already know, like who is Steven, you know, what is the video game, stuff that nobody really cares about. And obviously there are going to be videos that pop up after this, and probably mainstream game articles that go over just the broad bullet points. Some of the bullet points I can give you straight away is that if any of this is proven true, it's fucking nuts. I've been saying this the whole time.
And Spellverse 1, hi. I'm just hanging out.
Saying since day one, once all the sides of the story this come out, you're going to see some insane claims. Like, there's obviously already crazy claims.
Did you draw that?
No.
It's in the public, but some of the crazy claims that are in here are that the board essentially used coercion and threats of physical violence to take over the company in order to profit wholly from the company and essentially kick Steven out and take control completely. And there's some crazy shit in here. So yeah, let's begin. The lawsuit seeks to stop Intrepid's rogue board of directors from intentionally destroying the company, including through layoffs of nearly its entire workforce. Through manufactured crisis and through bad faith foreclosures on secured loans, the board defendants intentionally sabotage Intrepid to steal its assets, including its most valuable assets, which is the video game. The video game was developed under the leadership of plaintiff Steven Sharif, a shareholder in Intrepid, visionary founder, creator of MMORPG Ashes of Creation. Steven has dedicated more than a decade to developing Ashes of Creation, including its world, lore, gameplay systems, etc. The gaming community has been anxiously anticipating the full release of Ashes of Creation for years. Yeah, it's been a long time, and I'm sure some people have been very anxious. Defendants well understood that the success or failure of Ashes of Creation will be exceedingly public and personal to Steven. They also understood that its success would be exceedingly profitable. The board defendants took steps to ensure they alone profited from that success at the expense of Stephen, derivative plaintiffs, which are unnamed, and Intrepid as a company. Beginning in 2024, defendant Rob Dawson, Intrepid's principal lender, embarked on a campaign to extort control of Intrepid from plaintiff and ultimately to strip Intrepid of its assets, including groundbreaking intellectual property and trade secrets, aka the game, for Dawson's own use and financial gain. Through repeated threats to withhold funding for payroll, to shut Intrepid down, to financially ruin plaintiff and even physically harm plaintiff, Dawson, and then there's a redacted section here, it's like the fucking Epstein files. Again, this video will probably be called the Stephen files. Rob elected himself to board, cherry-picked additional board members who would then do his bidding. Those board members are defendants Ryan Ogden, who is also duly appointed Chief Financial Officer, Teresa Fett, Aaron Bartels, collectively with Dawson now referred to as board defendants. The board defendants failed to fulfill their fiduciary duties to the company. Instead, they engineered and executed a plan to strip Intrepid of its assets and transfer those assets to a Dawson-created and controlled entity called TFE Game Holdings, which, again, is the company that internally employees have seen evidence that, and this has been reported in multiple videos, my own included, that TFE was going to be the company that took control of Intrepid and all of its assets. And this was in plan from at least December of 2025. And then the lawsuit also alleges that these board members are likely also members of that company, and they were planning to misappropriate and claim ownership over Intrepid's intellectual property, trade secrets, and other assets, which is essentially the video game, right? It's the only valuable thing that Intrepid owns. That's what everyone's fighting over is the video game's intellectual property and the ability to create or sell the video game. The plan also included, among other things, deliberately starving Intrepid of cash to manufacture justification for a foreclosure by TFE, attempting to divert revenues owed to Intrepid's accounts controlled by TFE and Dawson, and attempting to execute a wrongful Article 9 foreclosure in favour of TFE's junior secured lien without notice to senior secured creditors. This is the bank, right? You can look this up publicly. I've talked about it in other videos. This is the bank's lien that was secured in 2020 and expired in December of 2025, which, as you'll notice, is a very coincidental, you might say, time frame, right? If the secured lien, if that needs to be paid in December of 2025, and the company's being rolled up in December of 2025, and everybody at the company knows that the bank is owed these millions of dollars, this is what the lawsuit is claiming, that they were doing so without notifying the bank and to take the money from the bank, which would be fucking insane, but obviously that's what the lawsuit's saying, and we'll see what the exhibits say or show, if they do show any of this as we get down there. This was all done with the goal of leaving unpaid debts and existing shareholders with Intrepid, while continuing to develop, sell, or profit from Ashes of Creation through the new TFE Game Holdings entity. When plaintiff objected to the foreclosure and alerted a senior secured creditor to defend its scheme, defendants realized their plan had unraveled and they abruptly and wrongfully terminated nearly Intrepid's entire workforce. So basically this just says Stephen told the bank. Stephen went to the bank because they were a secured creditor that was owed the money and said they're trying to close the company, they're trying to roll up the company without, paying you the money that you're owed as this secured creditor. And then the bank, obviously, as we know now, contacted Valve and said, don't give them the money because, that's my money. This is pretty much already confirmed, but now is also in plain text in a lawsuit. Defendants' actions signified to the public a complete collapse of Intrepid, and they triggered severe and intense public scrutiny regarding the apparent failure of the game, which obviously has been also talked about by Jason, is that because the loan was against Stephen's house, that he was owed money from this. So that's what that claim is, and this is the other claim, and hopefully there's some evidence in here to show which one of those is correct, or maybe both are true. Who fucking knows? Defendants' actions signified to the public a complete collapse of Intrepid, and they triggered a severe and intense public scrutiny regarding the apparent failure of the game, the treatment of the employees and plaintiff's perceived role in both. Defendants intentionally set up Stephen as the plaintiff as the scapegoat to face the backlash alone, including by intentionally filing a false corporate disclosure listing plaintiff as the sole board member and plaintiff's husband John Moore as chief financial officer, even though Ogden was the duly appointed chief financial officer, and all of the board defendants were board members. So I've talked about this in a previous video. You can look this up. This is public filing. You can just look this up yourself. Ryan Ogden was appointed as CFO. He was serving as CFO in the documents that were filed to the California local government. And he was there for like half a year. And then randomly, he filed an amended document that listed John Moore as CFO. And this is obviously alleging that John Moore wasn't the CFO at that time. And he just did this, for reasons. Who knows what those reasons are, but the lawsuit is claiming that this was to conceal identities of the board of directors and insulate them from public fallout. Since destroying Intrepid, defendants have been actively soliciting buyers for Ashes of Creation, so obviously we knew that they were trying to develop the game using overseas labor until the plan fell apart. But now, apparently, according to this, the allegation is that they're trying to just sell the game, which is inclusive of Ashes of Intrepid's intellectual property and trade secrets in an attempt to salvage their own financial exposure. They've also been publicly defaming plaintiff to the gaming community, which I assume is referring to Jason's release of text messages from 2015 to 2021, and also Jason saying a bunch of stuff about Stephen. I assume that's what he means by publicly defaming. Defendant's conduct has harmed the company and the plaintiff and poses continuing imminent and existential threat to the company. The company is basically fucked at this point, obviously. Through this action, plaintiff, both individually and on behalf of Intrepid, seeks damages based on defendant's efforts to sabotage Intrepid in its work on one of the most ambitious gaming projects ever developed. It's always funny when you read lawsuits because there's always stuff like this where they're like, oh, this is the best thing ever, this is innovation, this is crazy, and it's just talking about making a video game. Plaintiff also seeks injunctive and equitable relief to remedy harm to Intrepid and derivative plaintiffs from defendants' continued efforts to then destroy the company in pursuit of their own greed. Then obviously argues why it's in this jurisdiction and venue. It's in this jurisdiction and venue because it's in California. This all happened in California. And then it goes over the parties. So Robert Dawson is the first one named, and he's named as the first one because he's Intrepid's chairman of the board since September of 2024. And also has been the majority shareholder since July of 2024, which is when basically he took control of the company. So from this, Robert Dawson has had majority control of the company since July of 2024. He's also a junior secured lender to Intrepid. He resides in Florida, blah, blah, blah. He is alleged to be the one conceiving and executing the wrongful foreclosure strategy described herein, and through his post-closure efforts to solicit buyers and employees in California to exploit the company's intellectual property and trade secrets. Then it goes over Ryan Ogden. Ryan Ogden also been the CFO since September 2024, board member on or around August of 2024, lives in Florida, and same allegations, but that he also voted to approve, ratify, and participate in wrongful foreclosure strategy, personally participate in and directed the preparation of foreclosure assets list, attempted to divert company revenues, and by submitting false regulatory filings in California that give rise to some of the claims within. Teresa, she also is alleged to have been part of the same things that the board's being claimed. I think we can skip over most of this, to be honest. Aaron Bartels, same thing. And then defendant TFE Game Holdings, it just describes what the company is and why they're named in the lawsuit. And obviously it's because they're the ones, that's the company entity that's allegedly trying to take control of the company and all of its assets, which this lawsuit's saying that they're not allowed to do. So here we go, the general allegations. Let's get into the real meat. Sharif, this just explains who Stephen is. Lifelong gamer, MMORPG fan, sought to create a video game, blah, blah, blah. In 2015, co-founded Intrepid alongside husband John Moore to develop MMORPG Ashes of Creation. He put his own money in, apparently, which is another thing that has been claimed he didn't. So we're going to see records of this, presumably at some point during the lawsuit. He surrounded himself with seasoned game developers, helped bring the vision to life whom he closely directed and supervised. It was a passion project. Then obviously they're claiming that it was the most anticipated MMO in 2017, 2020, 2022. God damn, it's been a long time. Star Citizen fans in the chat. Public excitement about development was further fueled by the innovative development approach in which he fostered an open dialogue with Ashes Creation potential user base. In furtherance of this approach, he went and hosted webinars, the live streams talking about the game. There were many concrete benefits to this novel development approach. We all know, obviously, open development, they're going to talk about the fact that, with a bunch of eyeballs and a bunch of opinions, you can develop the game differently and hopefully more in line with what the community wants. Following years of this iterative diligence, early access version of the game was released to public in 2025 through Steam. Popular gaming platform prior to the execution of Dawson and the board's defendant solicit plan, Ashes of Creation boasted the highly unusual day 30 player retention rate of approximately 76%. That's really good. If you're looking at video games normally, 76% after 30 days is really good. And then obviously it just goes through what are the intellectual property and trade secrets, which is all the things that make up a video game, right? The assets, the sounds, the design, the systems, etc. And then it just goes over talking about how they kept the trade secrets a secret and why they're valuable, etc. Intrepid was Sharif's personal passion project. He provided early funding to the company from his personal funds. Thereafter, in 2017, the company raised approximately $3 million in Kickstarter campaign, demonstrating the outset the commercial viability of intellectual property and trade secret materials, aka the video game. During this initial phase of the company, its board of directors consisted of Sharif, John Moore, and Thomas Alkazin. The company's sole shareholders were John Moore and Thomas Alkazin. Starting in 2017, the company began acquiring debt financing, much of Sharif and Moore personally guaranteed. In 2020, the company acquired a $6 million loan from Commerce West Bank pursuant to the Federal Reserve's Main Street Lending Program. Okay, so the Federal Reserve Main Street Lending Program is a federally backed loan, which means it's the US federal government giving this loan. And if you look up the Federal Reserve's Main Street Lending Program, this was a COVID era loan that had a maturity term of 5 years. It was personally guaranteed by Moore, collateralized by all the company's assets, including specifically its intellectual property, which includes the trade secret materials. A year later, in 2021, one of the company's existing lenders introduced Sharif and the company to claimed billionaire Robert Dawson as a potential lender. So obviously what we saw from Jason's texts was a bunch of texts between Jason and Steven where the company was just in absolute fucking turmoil, and Steven was constantly begging for money to pay payroll and to do things like go to events and things of that nature from 2017-ish till 2021. And then the texts stop from what Jason released himself, which was a question mark for me. Why did the text stop there specifically? Because obviously 2021 to 2026, there's got to have been a lot of shit that happened. Obviously, we know that Jason filed a lawsuit against Intrepid years later in like 2024, something like that, I believe. But at the end of the text messages that Jason released between him and Steven, we saw that they were back on good terms and it was a cordial business relationship where they were friendly with each other. But then as those text messages stop, here we see that that's when Jason introduced Robert Dawson, which is somebody you can Google. Robert Dawson and Jason Karamanis and Ryan Ogden. These people have all been in companies together, multi-level marketing companies, obviously. And then, obviously, from 2021 to 2025, Dawson continuously extended debt to the company. Dawson was originally cooperative and supportive of Sharif in his vision, and he held himself out as a confidant for Sharif. Dawson came up in the multi-level marketing space, and he was not a gamer. When it became clear the project was not going to turn as quick of a profit as he hoped, his behavior towards Sharif changed dramatically starting in 2023. Dawson's campaign of control and coercion. Okay, that's a title. That's a fucking header. In late 2022 and early 2023, a major video game developer expressed interest in acquiring Intrepid for hundreds of millions of dollars. People didn't know about this before. This is a thing. There was a big offer on the table to buy Intrepid and to continue development of Ashes. Dawson urged Sharif to reject the proposed deal in favor of continuing to develop Intrepid from the ground up under his financing. So the allegation here is that Dawson was saying, don't accept the big money deal to sell the game for a whole bunch of money, even though at this time Steven was the only person who owned the company. Well, Steven, John, and that other guy that was just listed, Thomas Alkazin. So they were the only people that owned shares, and according to this, the other people, including Dawson, just owned debt. But what's being said here is that Dawson convinced Steven to reject the big money deal to sell the game, and that he would continue financing the game. Sharif heeded the advice, rejected the acquisition bid, and acquisition discussions ended in early 2023. The acquisition offer, however, was the turning point in Sharif and Dawson's relationship. Dawson saw that the company had very real potential for providing extremely high returns, and Dawson began a ruthless campaign for control of the company in order to realize those returns as quickly as possible, without consideration for the quality of the game and the typical development timeline of MMORPGs. So basically what the allegation here is that they saw like a big mega money deal come in, like, oh, this thing we invested in, we weren't super sure it was going to be worth tons of money, but then this deal makes it look like it will be worth tons of money. Don't accept that deal. Instead, we'll finance the game, we'll get it to the release, and then it'll be worth more money, presumably. Right? This is what this is saying. And then the allegation is that as soon as they saw the company was going to be worth a bunch of money, they decided to start pressuring to get control of the company in its entirety so that they would be the sole beneficiaries of potentially this big payday that they'd been substantiated from, like a big, a big deal that had been offered. according to the allegations. From early 2023 through May 2024, Dawson repeatedly held Sharif and the then board hostage by threatening to withhold financing for employee payroll and health insurance funding days before payroll deadlines, to shut down the company through litigation, and to cause Sharif financial ruin and physical harm. If we see evidence of this, this is a fucking crazy thing, right? If we see evidence that this board was saying, oh, do this, or we're not going to put money into the account to pay the employees, or we're going to physically harm you, that's crazy. So maybe it's in the exhibits, or maybe it's going to come out if it's true in Discovery. That's fucking nuts, right? This turns it into like a fucking Netflix documentary and not just like a video game development that went wrong. So unless Sharif signed documents granting Dawson greater and greater amounts of equity and control, this is what he is being alleged that was being said. We'll harm you unless you give us more equity and control. We'll not pay the employees. We'll sue you. We'll do X, Y, and Z unless you give us more control of the company. And here's a specific example, which would be crazy to put in a lawsuit if you don't have evidence of this. But obviously, we're not going to see the evidence, I don't think, at least until Discovery. In just one example, Dawson demanded a warrant granting him 10% of the company for $10. Yeah, okay. In other instances, Dawson demanded zero-cost, non-dilutable equity options in his convertible debt notes. Sharif and the then board acquiesced to Dawson's demands because they believed Dawson would make good on his threats and that refusing would result in imminent catastrophe for the employees and the company. Dawson also required Sharif to involve him in all discussions with company counsel, despite his outsider status, and even falsely represented that he was an agent of the company to retain company counsel. I might be wrong here, but what this means is that he was basically saying you can't talk to a lawyer unless I'm there, and I will also be saying I represent the company while you're talking to a lawyer. As a result of the direct, intentional, and mounting pressure, plaintiff suffered an extreme health crisis, including a hypertensive emergency and acute kidney failure, hospitalization, and vision loss from blood pressure complications, including macular edema. Don't know what that is, but the claim here is that due to all of this that was going on, Stephen was hospitalized with kidney failure and hypertension that caused him to lose his partial vision. Plaintiff suffers long-term impairment from his health issues he experienced during this period. Dawson was privy to plaintiff's health issues at the time and is well aware of the long-term impacts plaintiff suffered. Now we're at the fucking Stephen files section here where there's a bunch of redacted stuff. This is court sealed. We're not going to see this. Presumably this is some private confidential agreement between the two parties being Stephen and this board, which is Dawson, Bartels, Teresa, Ryan Ogden, etc. Dawson also insisted on revising the company's corporate governance documents and shareholder agreements. On May 16, 2024, company shareholders entered into the shareholders agreement. Under the shareholder agreement, plaintiff expressly retained full creative control of the company. So they're saying that even under this agreement, Stephen Sharif maintained full creative control of the company, but that he didn't own the company. So he was in charge of the creative direction, and Dawson and other people were in charge of, they owned the company, basically, is what this is saying. After this event that happened, this thing, which again I'm going to assume is some kind of settlement behind closed doors, Dawson gained both de jure and de facto control of the company finances and governance. He was not only the majority shareholder, also remained the primary provider of crucial debt financing. He leveraged his newly acquired power over Sharif and his team of employees by continuing to routinely threaten to withhold funds, especially just before bi-weekly payroll deadlines, to extract concessions. For example, based on the threat of withholding payroll funds, he forced Moore to resign from the board and transfer his equity to Sharif. Dawson and his deputies also frequently threatened to harm Stephen and his loved one physically if Stephen did not comply with his demands. This is fucking crazy. I mean, I did say this was going to be a crazy story, and once people saw the allegations on both sides, it was going to be an absolutely fucking nuclear fallout. Because if there is evidence of this that comes up in court, my God, this is crazy. On May 13th, 2024, Dawson securitized his debt against all assets and all personal property of the company, including intellectual property, which includes the trade secret materials, aka basically the game. Dawson lien financing statement attached here to is Exhibit B. We'll go over that at the end, I guess. Lenders that hold senior priority positions to Dawson are the Small Business Administration and Commerce West Bank, whose loan is also collateralized by all assets and personal property of the company, including intellectual property, which includes trade secret materials. And that is also attached to this, so we can go over it to see who actually is the person who, on paper, is owed the money, right? If you're going to roll up the company, you have to pay out the people who are owed stuff from within the company need to be privy to and involved in this process because they're owed stuff. You can't just say, oh, I'm owed, and jump the queue and just take everything, which is what this is alleging they tried to do. Dawson knew or should have known of these senior liens because they are publicly available. I mean, yeah, you can literally look this up in 5 minutes yourself. As majority shareholder, Dawson voted himself and his close business associate Ryan Ogden onto the board of directors during a September 4th, 2024 board meeting. The board appointed Dawson as chairman of the board and Ogden as CFO. Dawson directed Ogden to open new bank accounts for Intrepid at Pathway Bank, which is a bank over which Dawson exercises de facto and de jure control. So he controls the bank, and he got Ryan Ogden to open new accounts at the bank he controls. Sharif ceased to have any access to active company bank accounts, and he was effectively stripped of financial and other authority. So obviously in the lawsuit that was filed by TFE Holdings, which is owned by Rob Dawson, which is this person, they're claiming in that lawsuit that they didn't have control of the finances and didn't have access to the books, and Stephen was in charge of everything. And then Stephen is claiming that since September 4th of 2024, they had control of everything and even had new bank accounts and everything that they were controlling. And obviously Jason has also claimed publicly that they didn't have access to stuff, but this is saying that they did. So again, we're going to have to wait and see document-wise who's correct on this one, because both sides are saying a completely polar opposite thing to each other. By August 2025, Dawson elected his close associates Teresa and a substantial company creditor and Aaron Bartels to the board. Thus, from that time until Sharif's January 19, 2026 resignation from the company, the board consisted of Dawson, Ogden, Fett, Bartels, and Sharif. All these people acted at the behest of Dawson rather than as independent board members, and they continually voted in alignment with him. Dawson frequently insisted that Sharif not publicize Dawson's role within the company. So this is saying people's biggest criticism and complaint of this whole situation is Stephen always said the company was only financed by him. He was the only person involved. There was no, corporate overlords or whatever. And obviously the text messages from Jason show that even from the very beginning, there was other people putting money into the company. But then people have also said, reasonably so, why when a board was created and these other people gained control of the company, did you not let people know that this was the case? Because that would have informed people's purchasing decisions. And this is where a lot of the allegations of, oh, it's a scam came from. And what this lawsuit is saying, at least on the face of it, is that Dawson was the one who now owned the company that was saying, do not talk about my role within the company. Ogden, too, did not wish for his identity and role to be revealed publicly. Sharif was under no express obligation to hide Dawson or Ogden's roles and identities, but Sharif complied out of fear of reprisals, and he continued to act as the external face of the company. So that's the claim. Obviously, we're going to need to see documentation of this, as with fucking everything claimed in all these lawsuits. On October 15, 2025, Sharif notified the board that he would take a temporary medical leave relating to the medical issues he'd suffered in 2024. He then advised the board that he would be stepping back from his role as CEO and board member, but that he would continue as he was able as creative director. Intrepid partners with Valve. Okay, so this is the Valve section and how this all plays out. So in around September 25, the board, against Stephen, Sharif, and senior leadership's advice, directed that Intrepid undertake an early access launch of Ashes of Creation in Okay, so when I saw the announcement of the game is coming to Steam, my immediate reaction, obviously I'd been aware at the time before the public announcement, because I'd been contacted by somebody with internal knowledge to the company and informed right when the employees were informed that this game was going to Steam. My immediate reaction was there's something massive going on behind the scenes. Either there's no money or somebody's exerting control to get this game pushed out into the public to begin making money with the game, to reduce operating costs, to do whatever. It's a financially motivated decision. This was blatantly obvious from, if you know anything about the company, and optically, it looks bad. You can spin it whatever way you want, but if a game is saying we have loads of money, it's fine, don't worry about it, and then the game goes to then say, oh, we're launching in early access on Steam, there's only one factor for doing that, and it's financially driven. What this is saying is that the board forced this decision against the judgment of all the people involved, such as Stephen. The early access launched on December 2011, 2025. Steam is a worldwide platform. We know what Steam is. We don't have to. Ogden specifically assured Commerce West Bank that the revenue owing to the company from Valve under the revenue share agreement related to the Steam early access launch would cover outstanding obligations of the Commerce West Bank loan. Okay, so this is, for context, if you're following along with this still, obviously this is going to be a long one, right? We're a third of the way through this document. It'll speed up a little bit. So obviously the public narrative right now, because of what Jason Karamanis has said on live streams, etc., which has then been repeated by a bunch of mainstream game outlets and things like that, is that Stephen went to the bank without the board's knowledge and did this as some kind of ploy to unlock equity in his house or something, right? But this is alleging that Ogden specifically spoke to the bank and said the money that's coming in from the Steam sales from the bank will be covering our obligation to you, which was millions of dollars of a bank loan that everybody in the company knew was pending, right? Everybody knew this needed to be paid in December of 2025 because it had been there since 2020, and these people had been involved in the company for years by the point of 2025. So if true, this is obviously a very easily provable point, right? There's going to be communications between Ogden and the bank that will be able to come up in discovery. So we'll see on that one, I guess. But this is a very specific claim. This is a very specific point that would be easy for either side to prove one way or another, right? Dawson, TFE, and the board execute a wrongful foreclosure in an effort to steal the company's intellectual property and trade secrets. Beginning in 2025, the board collectively devised a plan and an agreement to take possession of the company's assets via a wrongful Article 9 foreclosure process using Dawson's junior secured lien against the company. They intentionally planned to do so without providing proper and legally required notice to senior secured lenders so that they could transfer company assets to a new company created and controlled by Dawson, TFE, and wipe out equity holders and prior creditors in Intrepid. Again, a lot of people had liens against Intrepid. And what this is claiming is that they came in and just said, oh, never mind, we're just going to take control of everything, and all these other creditors, we're going to jump ahead of them and just take the stuff, which is a wild claim to make. Then it says, of course, they believe that all the board members are likely members of TFE, which is the new company. The board defendants also intended to lay off a large portion of the Intrepid workforce without required wages, PTO, and severance, because those debts would remain with Intrepid. So the allegation is they were going to saddle all of the debt on Intrepid as an entity and then just move all the stuff that's worth money to a new entity and continue operating without having to pay back all this stuff that was owed, while bringing a portion of the employee base over to TFE to finish development of the Ashes Creation project in order to monetize it for their own personal benefit. All the employees have seen this communication. So this part is verifiably true. Dawson had indicated that he was considering executing this strategy to obtain greater control over the development project as early as 2024. Beginning in 2025 and in furtherance of their scheme, the board defendants intentionally permitted the company to accrue substantial unpaid obligations to vendors and service providers with the goal of using the debt to improperly declare a default and justify an Article 9 foreclosure on Jason's junior secured lien. So what they're saying, they stopped paying vendors, which obviously we've seen multiple lawsuits from vendors, right? We saw the lawsuit, I believe it was Google Web Services or something, right? There was a lawsuit from SADA Systems, which is a Google Cloud partner, suing Intrepid for $850,000 plus of unpaid fees, basically, for the services rendered to Intrepid. So this is saying that in 2025 they started intentionally not paying vendors in order to justify closing the company and taking control of the assets of the company into a new company, which is again a absolutely fucking nuts accusation to make, and a very specific one. Prior to the wrongful foreclosure and in furtherance of their underhanded plan, Dawson directed Ogden as CFO to open bank accounts at Pathway Bank for TFE, the new company Dawson had created to house the wrongfully foreclosed upon assets. Prior to the wrongful foreclosure and to further justify declaration of default, Ogden wrongfully directed Valve to divert the deposit funds owed to the company under the partnership with Steam to a new Pathway bank account for TFE. Valve did not comply. Jesus Christ, this is such a fucking mess. Holy shit. Plaintiff first objected to the board defendant's plan during a December 15th, 2025 in-person board meeting. So this is saying Stephen was in a board meeting and said, no. Specifically objected to the board causing the company to not pay vendors, to the board's plan to lay off a large portion of employees without requisite pay and benefits, and to the legality of the foreclosure. After the meeting ended and all the board members had left, Dawson confronted Stephen in a physically intimidating manner and told him he, quote, didn't want any shit, and coerced him to sign between 30 and 40 signature pages to the corresponding agreements for which plaintiff was not permitted to review. This is honestly like some mafia shit. Like, if this is true, this is fucking crazy. Plaintiff next objected to the board defendant's plan to foreclose without notice to the senior secured lenders on a phone call with Dawson and Dawson's personal counsel that occurred between December 28th, 2025 and January 3rd, 2026. So right at the end, just almost not even a full month before the actual fucking implosion of the company. On December 30th, 2025, in furtherance of the foreclosure scheme, Ogden, at the direction of and in concert with the other board defendants, filed a false California state information document with California Secretary of State in order to conceal the board defendants' identities from the public during the planned foreclosure and attempted revenue diversion scheme. So you can see this. You can look this up. I pointed this out like 10, 15 days ago, right? If you go to the California UCC website and you look up the company information documents, you can see that at one point Stephen Sharif was listed as CEO and John Moore was listed as CFO, and then John Moore was changed to Ryan Ogden as CFO, and then on December 30th Ryan Ogden resubmitted, and he even signed submitting saying this is me putting the document forward that John Moore was back as CFO. But this document's claiming that John was taken off the board forcefully by Dawson and that he was forced to sign over his shares to Sharif and was no longer the CFO. So this is accusations of filing a knowingly false California State of Information document with California Secretary of State to conceal the identities from the public during the time where they are also alleging that the company was being, wrongfully rolled up with all this debt being saddled onto Intrepid to make this new company, which they're claiming is a revenue diversion scheme. The statement of information listed plaintiff as the sole director of the company, intentionally omitting Dawson, Ogden, Fett, and Bartels. Because if you go on that document, it literally says all board members have to be on this document. But then it's obviously filed, and at this point, there is a board, and they're not put on there, right? So this is what it's saying, and you can see these documents yourself. It further misidentified the company's CFO as Moore, despite the fact Ogden had been duly appointed CFO since September 2024. Again, this is a really easy point to prove or disprove. If you just have company minutes, which how board meetings work is everyone's in a room and you have to say, oh, this person nominates this person for this position, and then other people have to agree. They have to vote on it. That's literally how board meetings work. And board meetings presumably have minutes, and then obviously presumably there will also be emails and things. So making a claim this specific with public filings also there to show it is absolutely crazy if you do not have the evidence that this happened. So presumably this is going to, somebody's going to prove this or disprove it very, very easily because they'll have the minutes of the meetings. Ogden, in concert with the other board defendants, filed the false California statement act in an effort to direct any public fallout from their conduct directly to Sharif. The board defendants did so despite actual knowledge of Sharif's fragile medical condition, and also knowledge that the gaming community would likely wrongly blame and eviscerate Sharif as the only publicly identified director should Intrepid and Ash's Creation endeavor fail or be involved in controversy. I mean, he was going to be anyway, because he made claims from the very beginning that it was only him involved. So obviously, even if you then later on say, oh, here's all these other people that are involved, people are going to be like, why did this happen? Why did you make these claims originally? But obviously this is considerably worse. If the entire time I was making videos about this originally, everyone was like, there was no board, clearly there was no board. And then you find out, yes, in fact, there was a board, but we've moved past the point of that being a controversy and moved straight on to who is directly responsible for each point of this failure. And so far, all of the public information we've had has come from Rob's lawsuit and Jason's text messages from 2015 to 2021, and that's all we've had. So this is obviously all new public information. In advance of the wrongful foreclosure and in furtherance of the board defendants' scheme to steal the company's intellectual property and trade secrets, Ogden prepared a company asset list on December 31st, 2025. That list specifically references components of Ashes of Creation that comprise the company's intellectual property and trade secret materials. The list references Ashes of Creation code base, game content, text, narrative, sound, etc., customized gameplay, audio effects, visual effects, other special effects. It also includes a list titled from ChatGPT, of course. That includes software and game code, game engine and technical frameworks, game systems and trade secrets, and creative content and copyrighted works. Sharif embarked on a campaign to convince the board to abandon its foreclosure scheme. So what Stephen said publicly was, I resigned because I couldn't agree with the board and what they were doing. And obviously this lawsuit is now alleging that what they were doing was these things that we've been going over in this lawsuit. But also one of the things that he said was that it was because he couldn't agree with what they were doing with the employees, which was to fire a bunch of people without paying them what they were owed, which has obviously been a huge point of contention, because Jason's public testimony of what he's been saying is that Stephen actually was saying to the board, I want equity, I want these things to personally enrich myself, and if I don't get them, I'm going to resign and fuck up the whole company. So this is a direct contradiction to that, although not mentioning that. So maybe there's a factor here that somebody's eventually going to show in some form of provable communication. But what he's saying is he tried to convince them to stop the foreclosure scheme in specific. At every board meeting between January 3rd and his January 19, 2026 resignation, estimated to be between 10 and 15 times, he objected to the board defendants' plan to wrongfully foreclose on Dawson's junior secured lien without notice to secured lenders, to the board defendants' attempt to divert funds from the Steam partnership to the company TFE, and to the board defendants' plan to terminate a large portion of Intrepid's employee base without compensating PTO and severance. Again, presumably this will be, if true, in the minutes. There is an exhibit mentioned here, so I wonder what that is. On January 7th, 2026, in advance of the wrongful foreclosure and in furtherance of the board defendants' scheme to steal the company's intellectual property and trade secrets, Dawson changed the secured party on his secured party financing statement from himself to TFE, which is also attached, interestingly. On January 14th, Dawson, in concert with the board of defendants, represented to investors that the company had secured the necessary capital commitments to make it to September 2026 launch. During this meeting, Dawson revealed the foreclosure scheme and his intent to wipe the investor and lender table clean. On January 15th, Sharif blew the whistle on defendants' foreclosure plan to Commerce West Bank, whom defendants had intentionally failed to notify of the foreclosure. Prompted by this information, Commerce West Bank issued an event of default letter on January 18, 2026, demanding immediate and full repayment from either the company or the personal guarantor of the loan, Moore. And obviously you can see from the other lawsuit, right, that this is a little bit contradictory in terms of what was filed against Stephen regarding the whole Steam situation. Because in this lawsuit specifically, it states that they're claiming that Steam notified Stephen Sharif on January 18th and he didn't share it with the company. But then in this lawsuit, he's claiming that the bank actually contacted the company, which would be a crazy thing to lie about because it's a fucking bank on a federally secured loan. So this is a crazy point based on that, because they're saying here that a bank contacted the company, so they did know about the fact that this was happening, that they owed this money. On January 16th, Dawson caused Intrepid to declare default on the one hand, and he caused TFE to foreclose on the company's assets on the other hand. Dawson caused TFE to engage in a non-judicial disposition in favor instead of a private sale. Dawson, TFE, and the board defendants failed to advertise the sale in industry standard publications or platforms. They did not involve a broker or auctioneer and did not publish any marketing of the sale in any manner. The intellectual property and trade secrets of an MMORPG are not customarily sold on a recognized market, but Dawson, TFE, and the board defendants pursued a self-serving private sale anyway. TFE obtained Intrepid's assets via a self-interested transaction between Dawson, who controlled Intrepid on the one hand, and Dawson, who controlled TFE on the other hand. This self-interested transaction was completed at the specific design of Dawson and the board defendants, who blessed the sale for their own personal profits. This foreclosure approximately and directly caused Intrepid harm in the form of the loss of its most valuable assets, aka the game. The only asset the company had is the game. Dawson and the board members executed the agreement over Sharif's objections and in violation of the rights of senior secured creditors and derivative plaintiffs, the bank. Dawson performed the foreclosure in an intentional clandestine manner, and he specifically ignored his counsel's advice that Dawson must provide notice to senior secured credits, including Commerce West Bank. This is fucking nuts. Immediately thereafter, on January 19, 2026, Sharif resigned from the company, and as a member of the board, in his resignation letter, he specifically identified his reasons for resignation, among others, as 1, his disagreement with the board's repeated attempts to terminate employees without payment of wages and compensation legally owed to them, which is also a thing he said publicly. 2, his disagreement with the private foreclosure, given his serious concerns the approach raised regarding fiduciary duties owed to derivative plaintiffs, creditors, employees, and the company. And 3, him being subject to repeated threats, coercion, and ultimatums to execute documents and actions that he openly and consistently protested. F. Dawson and the board illegally separate Intrepid's entire workforce and leave plaintiff to suffer the fallout. This is going over the WARN Act, right? Which obviously the employees, they're the ones that have been the most fucked by this, and they've also got their own lawsuit against Intrepid for money that they are legally owed. On or about January 31st, the board defendants caused Intrepid to issue WARN Act notices without the required notice period, which is 60 days. The board defendants took this action upon learning that the Commerce West Bank had learned of the wrongful foreclosure and had contacted Valve to intercept the funds due to Intrepid from the Steam partnership, meaning the board defendants could no longer access that money to fund TFE's ramp up. So the narrative so far has been that Stephen snaked the money from Valve for personal gain. But as far as I understand it, and as this is claiming, you have to notify the bank as the secured creditor that this thing was going on, that they were going to roll up the company with the Article 9 foreclosure and move assets into a new company because they're a secured creditor and it's federal money. This is a federally backed loan. So that what he's saying in this lawsuit, which again is a crazy claim to make because this, in my mind, would be immediately illegal, at least from my understanding, is that you have a responsibility to inform the bank, otherwise you're party to what you believe is a crime, right? Because if you're saying this, they're going to take the money that's owed to the bank, that the bank has said we're owed this money, and he said earlier in this lawsuit that Ryan Ogden personally, as CFO, assured the bank that they would be getting the money from the Steam funds, and then he's saying that they were going to take those Steam funds, not inform the bank, and put them into the new company. Then his position, he's claiming, is that he had to tell the bank, otherwise he would be party to something that he believes to have been wrongful and potentially a criminal action, because if he wouldn't have told the bank, he would have been essentially in on the fact that they were taking this money that everybody was that knew was owed to the bank. That's the claim, right? This is a fucking insane thing to, 1, happen, and 2, to make claims of if you don't have evidence of. Like, this is an insane thing to say. And if not, the bank is going to be saying, why the fuck are you saying this in a lawsuit when this didn't happen with money that is the US government's? That's a really stupid thing to do if you don't have the evidence that this actually happened. The corporate unrest following by the mass layoffs generated significant agitation in the online gaming community. That's a real understatement, yeah. However, Dawson and the board defendants have intentionally hidden behind the guise of anonymity. It was no error that Ogden filed a blatantly false statement of information with California Secretary of State identifying only Sharif and Moore as company directors and or officers. Rather, it was a calculated action intended to shield the board from the fallout of their actions and wrongfully place the public blame on Sharif. The fallout for Sharif has been swift and devastating. The public has wrongfully blamed Sharif for the downfall of Intrepid, accused Sharif of legal wrongdoing, and called Sharif a liar. Sharif has received death threats, and both Sharif and his family fear constantly for their physical safety. The board defendants specifically discussed during a January 30th, 2026 board meeting with multiple witnesses present, using this online campaign to frame Sharif for the company's collapse. They would let Sharif take the fall and emerge as White Knights in a few months with plans to revive the game beloved by millions. I mean, whether this is true, this is exactly what's happened. So if there is a meeting where this happened and there is witnesses that are going to go on record that this happened, the fallout is exactly what this states. So again, another crazy thing to claim if you don't have evidence of it. But this is exactly what's happened. Everyone does believe these things, and everyone does believe the board is like in the right. To the same end, the board defendants have piled onto this false narrative by making false allegations that Sharif misled creditors and investors the game development milestone and completion dates. That Sharif misrepresented the nature of his relationship with business partners and plaintiff and more misappropriated company funds. This is what has been claimed by both Jason and the TFE lawsuit. On information and belief, the board of defendants have taken the further step of distributing defamatory materials, including false statements of criminal wrongdoing about Sharif to members of the gaming public for public dissemination. At all times, Sharif appropriately caveated to potential lenders that any estimated timeframes with respect to Ash's development milestones of completion were just estimates, subject to a number of variables outside of his control. Game development is an iterative process. At all times, Sharif appropriately caveated that relationships could increase the value of the game, e.g. publishing deals were speculative and were not guaranteed. At no time did Sharif intentionally misappropriate funds from the company. Public statements to the contrary are intended to invoke public outrage and outcry against Sharif to shield the defendants from the fallout of their wrongful actions described herein. So here we go. Valve freezes revenues. My God, we're halfway through this. Oh my God, this video is going to be hours long. It's already an hour. On February 3rd, 2026, Valve terminated Intrepid's partnership with Steam. So this is news, right? We knew they'd removed the buy button from the game. We didn't know that they'd terminated any kind of partnership. Valve cited as reasons for the termination that it received multiple conflicting requests from alleged account administrators for Intrepid, requesting authority to change Intrepid's banking information without response to Valve's follow-up requests seeking to confirm the validity of the requests. The Valve has received demands from multiple potential creditors for Intrepid's revenues, and that Valve is receiving a large number of refund requests from players who purchased the early access to the game. So, basically, everybody was saying, we're owed this money, transfer this money here, the game's a fraud, the game's a scam, give us our money back from the player base. And Valve turned around and went, what the fuck is going on here? And just froze everything so that they could figure out who is actually owed the money. Are they going to have to refund everybody? You know, what is actually going on, which we knew happened, but obviously not all the details of this. Before the issue of refunds, Intrepid would have been entitled to approximately $5 million, thus demonstrating the value of, among other things, the trade secret materials, aka the video game. Defendants continued to plan to imminently steal the company's intellectual property and trade secrets. TFE and the board defendants are currently actively soliciting former employees and the director of IT, the former director of IT, including with offers of compensation, to provide them access to Ashes of Creation along with its intellectual property and trade secret material components. And 2, attempting to sell Ashes of Creation along with its intellectual property and trade secret material components to lifeblood of the company and key to the value of shares owned by Sharif and the derivative shareholders to competitor game developers in order to recoup their own investments. So this, according to the allegations, is the new plan, is to just sell the game, get access to the game from the employees who they fired and didn't pay so that they can sell the game to somebody. The defendants' actions are in furtherance of the agreement between the board members to appropriate the company's intellectual property and trade secrets. Defendants' actions have already harmed the company, and they continue to pose irreparable and imminent harm to the company. And then there's all the claims for relief, right? I'm not going to go and read these because this is just saying what they want. Now we can go through the exhibits. It's actually not going to be as long as I thought it was going to be, because we're basically at the end. Okay, so now we have the public records that we could already look up ourselves. So this is Ryan Ogden, this is Robert Dawson's lien against the company, which is filed on the 13th of the 5th, 2024. And then this is the bank's lien, which is in 2020, right? 7/26/2020, which is showing who is owed the money. This is the Small Business Administration loan. This is then the federally backed loan, the Commerce West Bank loan that's for millions of dollars that they're claiming that they tried to circumvent. Then this is also on the 7th of January 2026, Robert Dawson changing his lien from himself to the new company that he spun up. I can't show some of these sections of these documents because they show people's addresses, and that will just get the video immediately privacy striked. So yeah, there we go. This is fucking nuts. I mean, I told you it was going to be nuts, of course. And as more and more people come forward with more and more lawsuits, it's going to get more nuts. Because this is obviously not everything. And this is the first time we're seeing the other side of the table's allegations and what they're claiming. This is, at least from what I can tell, a pretty specific lawsuit. It has a lot of dates, has a lot of specific claims. But obviously, as I said in the Nevada lawsuit, there's no evidence attached to this, of course, because there isn't going to be at this stage. So we have to take everything from all of these lawsuits and all of the claims being made publicly with a pinch of salt, because we don't have the records to see them. But at least now we have another side of the story. And if any of this turns out to be true, if we do see documents of like threats, witness testimony of, planning to do these things, minutes claiming that they were, changing who was involved in the company publicly and misfiling records on purpose and things, that paints an incredibly different picture to what we've been led to believe from other claims. Either way, this is a fucking insane... I said this was going to be like the biggest gaming drama of recent years, and you're getting that. That does, again, at the end of every Kickstarter MMORPG Rainbow, there is this. Usually not as crazy as this. A lot of the times it's like nobody ever talks, there's no lawsuits, maybe there's a class action suit in, say, Chronicles of Valeria's case, where nothing publicly ever comes of it. This is crazy. But there we go. Thanks for watching, as always. Hopefully you enjoyed. Let me know if you managed to get through over an hour of reading a legal document. And yeah, I'll continue covering it as things become public. And
I couldn't track any of that. I was too busy molding out. Jesus Christ. I'm suffering. Let me actually label these. Where is it? Okay, diffuse map. This thing right here. Details D. Oh, god damn it. My test results. My mandatory drug test. The first transfer details. Details needs to be diffuse map.
Jans laughed says, how'd you do?
I didn't look at it. If I failed, they're just gonna straight up say, "Hey, we're not gonna supply everything more Adderall." I'm like, all right, you know.
Jans laughed says, B.
I think I tried looking at it. I don't remember if there was other stuff besides. You on drugs? If I have to sign in, I'm not. I'm putting this down. Like, bro, just send me to a drive link. Damn. I ain't signing in. Strand map.
Dieblo4 says, okay, back now.
Welcome back. Tent masks.
Dieblo4 says, cheers.
Okay, diffuse time strand mask. Noise map.
Dieblo4 says, you doing another bear pally?
Nope, same one. I just have to reset because it's incorrect. It's like math. If it's not right, it's not right. You just have to start from scratch.
Dieblo4 says, oh okay.
Okay, noise map. Multiply. Well. Okay, let me see if I understand this.
Jans Laft says, you missed the next chapter of Ash's drama.
I wasn't able to listen to a bit of it because I'm fucking struggling. Okay, base color.
Dieblo4 says, it feels like I am in the Antarctica, it's so cold here, it's only 3 degrees.
Jesus. Base for. Color A, color B. So this is red.
Dieblo4 says, you busy working yawn.
My base color is black, right? Yep. I don't think it's gonna work.
Yawns laughed says, about to be in a meeting but my day is pretty slow. Dieblo4 says, he must be busy. Dieblo4
I don't have
says,
enough.
okay.
Mixed result C, mixed result D. Did I mess up?
Dieblo4 says, hi dad.
RGB mix AB. Mixed result C, mixed result B. I can only have 2 mixed results. Okay. So no, there's base, and then there's the tint base, because it's listed twice. Base tint color, then tint color. It's both black, but I'm gonna try to visualize it. Base tint color and tint color. I still don't have enough. Math ain't mathin'. Uh,
I'm leaving right to go over to the laundromat.
okay.
Of course, they have fucking both sides of the road, fucking in one lane. Like,
Really?
yeah. So I had to sit there and wait forever for them. They're gone now, thankfully.
Okay.
They were fucking with the power lines or something.
They've been doing that for the past week.
Yeah.
Fucking shut the power on us.
What are you thinking right now?
I'm thinking about a crash out. I have no idea how I should go about this, and I don't know how to even begin to start going in the right direction. That's it, just lost.
Jans Laft says, I have a Dieter idea. Have you tried running the 10 Ogan thing for
Yep.
a regular Warframe to see how they do it?
Yeah, that's what the reference was down there. It didn't help.
Dieblo4 says, okay guys, off to make some dinner, see you soon.
See you, Diablo.
Jans Laft says, bye. Dieblo4 says, bye.
I can't get the eyebrows to show. Like, there's obviously a fucking part right there. That's the entirety of what I've been trying to do for the past 2 days straight. I can't draw it on because the colors are being dictated by shaders. There's nothing for me to draw on. I gotta solve it through fucking math. I just can't have it affect like most of his body like that. Like that's also another problem. I guess for now, I just need to get this not look like fucking mush. can't find that one node I used. I guess I'm gonna go through them. Nope. There it is. Well, I guess I'm spending another day on it.
Yawns laughed says, Angry 3 hard.
Later. I'm going to work.